Now we're good. Okay. Good evening. It is 6 o'clock-ish, so we will go ahead and get started. Welcome to episode something, maybe 7, I guess, of the book of Genesis. We are now through the earliest chapters. The chapters 1 through 11 is kind of, you can section them off almost, and they have their own thematic direction. But now, once we get to chapter 12, as I've stated before, this is such a critical juncture in all of world history to where God chooses to shift from working through all of humanity at large. He's operating in the world and dealing with humanity through humanity at large. There's no single representative or anything like that. There was Noah that was righteous, and humanity was saved through his line. But God's program was worked through mankind in general. Now, it's such a critical turning point in history. He chooses now to work for the benefit of all mankind through a specific person. He's going to narrow down, okay? And we'll see who that is once we get started. And we'll get to do some more maps, some more detailed map work, finally. I mean, we got to touch on it a little bit in chapters 1 through 11, but now we'll get to see a bit more of the maps, which I'm excited about that. I don't know if you are, but I am. Really, that's all that matters, right? Okay. All right, who would like to start us off in a brief word of prayer? Wesley, all right, thank you.
Dear Lord, I just pray that we have a productive evening this evening, God. I just pray that as Adam leads us through your word, through your plan for humanity, and how you reveal yourself to us and for us, God, I just pray that it lands on our hearts. We just remind us of who you are and what you've done for us. So I just pray for all these things.
Amen, thank you very much, sir. All right, Genesis 12, here we are. Now, the Lord said to Abram, remember we were briefly introduced to him through Terah and his descendants in chapter 11. The Lord said to Abram, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. What is Abram's country? He is from Ur of the Chaldeans. Remember, when Jerry's around, we like to ask him how Ur was, how the Garden of Eden was, because this is Iraq, and so, Jerry spent time there. Up in Babylon was up there. So Abram was from Ur of the Chaldeans, and around his time, it does appear that Ur was probably the biggest city on earth at the time. I mean, it was really the center of the world, humanly speaking. Very cosmopolitan city, as much as you could get by those standards. But of course, very pagan and fallen. Humanity has gone its own way, even from the Tower of Babel on. Seth's line, that was then, this is now, and it's like, who's really even following after God? We'll see some people are. But Abram is called to go from his country into a land that God will show him, and that land, of course, will end up being the land of Canaan. Remember, Canaan and his descendants, Ham's son, cursed be Canaan, they dwell here in the land. And so over here, across the desert, Abram's told to go. Now, have you heard of the Fertile Crescent? Why is it called the Fertile Crescent? Because it's a crescent-shaped swath of fertility, yes. What do we see between Ur and Canaan? Now we see desert. And you, a friend and a camel, can go just about anywhere, but you're not marching a group of people across the desert. And so Abram, to do this journey, he would have to go up, down, and around. And really through most of antiquity, all the world's traffic followed along this Fertile Crescent. Because remember, anybody who's anybody is going to and from Egypt. And so that's why, remember, God placed Israel there, because the world's traffic would come through them. So Abram, got out of Ur, go to a land that I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation. Abram's just minding his own business, living life. And God, out of nowhere, says, I will make you into a great nation. And I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. This is amazing. To be told this by God out of nowhere. Abram, you, great nation, you will be a blessing. This is God said, I'm going to work through you, Abram. What did Abram do to deserve this? Well, nothing. Okay, this is God's pure choice of, I'm going to now work through you. Okay. Now, he says in verse 3, and he addresses Abraham specifically here, I will bless those who bless you. Okay, if Abram had any worries about, I'm going to cross the known world, basically, and go through all these dangerous travels. I'm going to go to a country where nobody knows me, and I don't know anybody, and these are kind of fierce people. This is very dangerous. Well, Abram, you don't need to worry, because I will bless those who end up blessing you, and him who dishonors you, I will curse. My hand of protection will be on you, Abram. It's going to be okay. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you. And in time, when people see that, they're going to know not to mess with you. And in you, all the families of the earth shall be blessed. From the very get-go, God's plan through Abraham, through Israel and all the Jews, whatever he's going to accomplish in the world through all that. Stay tuned for next spring. We'll talk a lot about it. What's the whole driving focus from the very start? All the families of the earth. Abram, this is my image, and I've been dealing with people at large, and people are starting to go off and make their own nations and families and clans, and I care about all of it. In you, all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Okay? God will work a plan through an individual for the benefit of everybody. Now, he was addressing Abram specifically in this promise in verse 3. We see later Isaac utters this when he's blessing Jacob, even though unintentionally, or he's blessing Jacob, he got tricked into it. But he does pronounce the blessing upon Jacob, kind of transferring the Abrahamic covenant, the family covenant. And he says this to Jacob. He who blesses you will be blessed. He who curses you will be cursed. So we see this initiative of protection, this protective plan that was on Abram, be transferred down through the patriarchs, apparently, to Jacob. And we also see it uttered again later. You probably have a cross-reference in your Bible. Who else mentions this protective promise? This is Balaam in his oracle, his first oracle, being hired to curse Israel. What comes out of his mouth, this is part of it. I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. Starts with Abraham, transferred through the patriarchs. It does seem to be God's intention for those who would come from Abraham as well. The people group through whom he's going to work for the benefit of all mankind. Don't worry, I got you. It's going to be okay. You'll never really be fully snuffed out, no matter how many people might try throughout all of history. Because those who bless you will be blessed, those who curse you will be cursed. I got it. Okay? That's what he tells Abram. All right. So far, so good? That's the plan. Abram, get up and go. Okay. But he had already left Ur, and so exactly when this comes, if he's in Ur or if he's in Haran, we talked about last time, that it could kind of go either way. But he moves with his dad, his wife, his nephew, and probably some others up to Haran. We don't know how long he spends in Haran. But somebody go ahead and read verse 4 through 9 in chapter 12. Nice and loud.
So Abram went as the Lord commanded him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. He took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, all the possessions they had accumulated, and the people they had acquired at Haran. And they set out for the land of Canaan, and they arrived there. Abram traveled through the land as far as the site of the great tree Moreh at Shechem. At that time the Canaanites were in the land. The Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." So he built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him. From there he went onward toward the hill. He went on toward the hills east of Bethel and pitched his tent with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. There he built an altar to the Lord and called the name of the Lord. Then Abram set out and continued toward the Negev.
All right, thank you, Wesley. So we get to some places here. Heading into this week, my progress goal, I shared this with Daniel, and he called me crazy. My progress goal for tonight would be to get through chapters 12, 13, 14, and Hebrews 7. Is that crazy? That's a bit too crazy. So I think you're right. We will probably only get through 12 and 13 tonight, which is okay. Because I was crazy for even contemplating that. But yes, he starts in Haran. He's 75 years old when he leaves. And we see the coast of modern-day Syria, Lebanon. And he's coming down to the land that God would show him. Okay, and as you come down, he's probably from Haran heading west and then down the coast. That's just the sensible way you come. World's traffic. Remember when we talked about briefly Jesus? You heard of him? Yes? Okay, Jesus. Yes. Let's get my Israel Places pins. Bloop. All right. He, probably right after his father dies, he moves his family, like the good eldest son he is, and he moves them to Capernaum. At this time, he's probably still doing carpentry work or whatnot, all of his brothers too. And when he starts his earthly ministry, he sets up shop, so to speak, here in Capernaum for a very specific reason. Remember what that was? Everybody goes through there. Herod, one of his main taxing stations was at Capernaum because the world's traffic came down, you hit the sea, you kick west around the Horns of Hittim, onto the Via Maris, probably through Megiddo, a couple other options, down to the coast, down to Egypt. So as the world's traffic is passing through and they got to stop and pay taxes to good old Herod, Jesus is there, continuing the Old Testament evangelistic strategy of stay home, the world's traffic will come to and through you. But now we have Abram coming down from Haran, and he travels down, and where's the first place in the land he kind of stops? Very important place. We talked about it in the geography class, in Jacob and Judges. So in every class we've had so far on Sunday nights, we've talked about Shechem. It's very important. So when he went, as the Lord told him, Lot went with him. Little foreshadowing there. Took Sarai his wife, Lot his brother's son, all their possessions they had gathered, and the people that they had acquired in Haran. So he's just getting rich, and his household is expanding. And they set out to go to the land of Canaan. When they came to the land of Canaan, Abram passed through the land to the place at Shechem, to the oak of Moreh. We talked a lot about Shechem. Do you remember anything kind of important about Shechem? He's traveling south, kicks around, comes there. He would have gone through the Ibleam Pass then probably to come straight down to Shechem. Yes, that's exactly right. And the Stone of Witness probably was set up there because Abram spent time there. This Oak of Moreh was a very famous place. And so the Old Testament tell of Shechem here, this is, the satellite image isn't rendering super clear. Remember when I talked about, I don't know if you remember when I talked, I always say that. When you're looking at Google Earth in Israel, they have kind of a way to make things not too clear for you, to to spy on or anything. But here we go. This is where Abimelech, during the book of Judges, this fortress temple here, he burns it down with everybody inside. Right outside here in the front, they did, I should fire up the picture. I don't know, we're talking about Abram, not talking about Joshua. It would take too much time. If I fire up the picture of the Stone of Witness that Joshua set up, it's right here. They found it, they set it up, and there it is. And you can visit it to this day. But this is Shechem, right next to Jacob's well. Here we go, Jacob's well down here. That's where Sychar was up here, woman at the well up there. Our father said, on this mountain we should worship. But you guys say Jerusalem, what is it? And they're in the shadow of Shechem. So that's where Abram goes first. Now at the time, of course, Canaanites were in the land. We know that. The Lord appeared to Abram and said, okay, you're hanging out here in Shechem, Abram. To your offspring I will give this land, that which you've already passed through to get here. Of course, none of these buildings were there at the time. And I don't know, maybe he was up on the mountain when God told him this, so he could see further. I don't know. But he said, to your offspring I will give this land. Abram, to your offspring, this land will be theirs. Who owns the land? God owns the land, so he has the right to give it, to deed it to whomever he pleases. Abram, to your offspring, I will give this land. So he built there an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him. From there, he moved to the hill country on the east, so he's going to get up and go again. Lots of map work. Look at how hilly and valley-y this area is. This is the northern area of Samaria. I like to compare this area of Israel to Texas Hill Country, kind of. If you're over there, it's on the same latitude, basically. Dallas and Jerusalem are like the same latitude. So when we finally get to go there as a church group, and you ask me, well, what weather should I prepare for? I said the same that the same that you experience this time of year here. Yeah, hills and valleys between Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal. Abram is there. Fast spin upcoming. Now he's going to move on. Now that God told him, okay, this land is going to be yours. God wants to show him more of the land. So he moves on. He presses further south. He's going to go south up by the switchbacks that are by Labona, by Shiloh. Most of these places aren't here yet when Abram passes through. But he does come to a place that is known. Okay. He moved to the hill country on the east of Bethel. There's Bethel. And he pitched his tent with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. Remember, we looked at these places in great detail when we were in the book of Joshua, didn't we? And I always have to tell the story, as you know, if you've with me so far, of what happened at the place between. A lot important things happened there biblically, but Jonna and I were on the best date of our lives. Okay, so when we were there with a group from our church, a bunch of Minnesotans in the West Bank, the hilarity will ensue. And so we're driving around on our bus, and a few people needed a bathroom break, which tends to happen when you have a bus full of people. And so we're like, okay, well, let's stop for a bathroom. Nabil, our bus driver, is like, I know a place we can stop. So we go to around Beitin, which is old school Bethel, modern day Beitin. And we find a shop, a convenience store. And when we all get off the bus and we go in. And this is not some convenience. This is not like, Buc-ee's or anything like that. This is a convenience store in the West Bank where tourists never go. So we all hop off the bus. I'm sure they're looking at us like, what is going on? So we go in their shop. And we ask, do you have a restroom we could use? Oh, well, no, we have a toilet in the back. So around the back, behind a little curtain, there's a toilet that only they use. It's like, y'all can use that. So there's a big, long line of Minnesotans are just waiting in line for the bathroom, for the toilet, the rickety toilet behind the curtain with no sink in there. Yes, I didn't use the bathroom that time. You did, so you know what it's like. And so I told everybody, so we're just waiting. So I told everybody, hey, when we leave, as you leave, it would be really nice if you buy something from this shopkeeper, a candy bar, whatever it is. Just buy something, just to honor them and thank them for what we got to use. And so we did, and on our way out, we moved on to the place between. So we get here to the place between, and this is where a Byzantine church was set up later, but this is where Abram is between Bethel and Ai. And this later is where Jacob will come and see the vision of the ladder and the angels coming up and down. He says, surely this is the gateway to heaven. So I like to call this the gateway. We were at the gateway to heaven. And the reason why it was the best date in our lives is we're all up there and we're just kind of, listening to the teaching. And then a van pulls up. Tinted windows. Out of the van, a handful of West Bank Palestinians. They get out. The call to prayer is going off. It's creepy as it gets. They come out. They're marching straight towards us. And you can tell the look on the face of Minnesotans. They're like, this is how we die. What is going on? They march straight to us. The guy reaches into his coat. Pulls out a fresh box of dates. Oh, it was amazing. He opened them up, and they gave it to all of us, passed it around. They were the best tasting dates we've ever had. That was their way of thanking us for their business. And hospitality still is a huge, huge, huge deal over there. So maybe they felt they kind of had to, but it was very kind of them. And so that was the best date we've been on. See, there you go. And that happened at the place between Bethel and Ai. And so here he is. Very important place here for what will happen later. And we'll see more things that go on here. Now, there he built an altar to the Lord and called upon the name of the Lord. So everywhere he's going, he's building altars. He's calling upon the name of the Lord. And Abram journeyed on, still going toward the Negev. Remember what the Negev is? It's the desert. It's the southern, pretty much half of the country is the Negev. It's the desert. Look at this. Desert. And you know I got to spoil Christmas every which way from Sunday. But you get a Christmas card, and you know the drawing on the front is the camels going through the desert and all that sort of stuff. That's not really Christmas. They go up to Bethlehem. Now, sure, they would have been on the camels and desert there, but like it shows the manger, which is surrounded by desert. It wasn't. But down here, it really is. Okay. Down here, it's the southern part is the Negev. Okay, we got our bearings. That's a lot of map work, I know. Zooming in and out, twisting around. But Abram is traveling through the land, and he keeps moving on, building altars, calling upon the name of the Lord, and God is bringing him through the land. He already showed it to him once. He's like, this is all going to be yours. Now, something very interesting happens here. And it's kind of a story. There's a few things throughout Abram's life here that we're reading through, and we come upon it, and then after we read it, we're like, what just happened there? Like, what? That's random. That's kind of out of nowhere. That's disconnected from everything. Well, it isn't, of course. It's there for a reason. And we see a few stories that go on in Abram's life that illustrate something very important. Okay. Somebody read verses 10 through 16. Thank you. All right. So I figured I'd pull it up because here it is. Shechem here, that's the fortress temple that Abimelech burned down. The stone of witness that Joshua set up is here. They found it toppled over. They set it back up. And here it is. It's the bottom third of it. It would have been higher, plastered. And this is, every indication does point to, like, this was the stone he set up. Heartbreaking that it witnessed centuries of rebellion and disobedience to God. It was the stone of witness that they swore that, you know, they would be faithful. There's Jonah and I, the stone. Jacob's well. Interesting enough as it is, we're going to bounce to here. That's Beittin. That's the town in which we stopped at the convenience store and bought all that stuff. Some people do pretty well for themselves in the West Bank, as you can tell. It's a nice place, actually, Beittin. Bethel, formerly Luz, bottom part of a well, grinding stone, the sling stone in there. Okay, mosque. Mosque probably stands over where the golden calf was. What am I trying to get to? There's I want to get to. I know. Bear with me. Elevator music. Talk amongst yourself. Place between. Here we go. The remnants of the Byzantine church. There we were when we were approached by the Palestinian men that brought the dates to us. Lots of cool stuff. Big nice houses in the background. That is the West Bank. And here we are. Ancient baptistry in the earliest days of the church. Baptism by immersion there, of course, was going on. And that's the place between. Okay. It's kind of cool archaeological remains there. More could be said, but that's not our purposes today. All right. Okay. Get me off of there. Okay. So, famine in the land. So since there was a famine in the land, hard to kind of get by, Abram was like, well, okay, I'm going to go down to Egypt. All right. What we will see, and we'll cover this in more detail next week, of course, when we get to the Abrahamic covenant. There are three aspects to the Abrahamic covenant, three basically promises of what God's going to do. We've already seen them a little bit here. But the Abrahamic covenant, God says, I will give you a land, a seed, a people, and a blessing. We've already seen that, but it gets spelled out in detail in chapter 15. Abraham, I'm going to give you a land, seed, and a blessing. That's going to be my covenant. I'm just going to give these to you. You're going to get them. And we'll see next week, it's another unilateral covenant. It's another covenant relationship It's the second one we see in the Bible, that God enters into with someone unilaterally saying, I take on the responsibilities to keep this covenant in force. Noah, you didn't have to do anything. The rainbow's for my benefit, and just I'm never going to flood you all again. And now, Abram, you don't even have to do anything to keep this covenant in force. I will take on the responsibility and the conditions to keep it in force. He's going to sleep through the thing. Okay, and that's meaningful. Abram, you will have a land, a seed, and a blessing. And this is where you're going to be. This is going to be good. No matter what anybody tries to do, Abram, I won't let them disrupt it. And he goes further. Abram, no matter what you try to do, this covenant will come about. It's so unilateral that God will not allow even Abram to mess it up. So those few stories that we see in Abram's life that might seem out of nowhere and disconnected, they're actually very meaningful because they're examples of how through Abram's conduct, he's almost trying to give it all away. I don't think consciously like, I don't want it anymore, but through his actions, they are the actions of a man who is like playing fast and loose almost with the things he's been promised. God basically kind of has to protect Abram from himself. And he is so determined to make that the stipulations of the covenant happen. This is one of those examples. There was a famine in the land, so Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there. So he already leaves the land. Okay, there was a famine. We can kind of, understand why he did it. But he does leave the land. He goes down to Egypt for a while to sojourn there. Because look at Egypt. Very rarely does a famine happen in Egypt. I wonder why. I mean, this is the Nile. Obviously, the delta is a bit more spread out than perhaps it was in antiquity. But even in the ancient world, like this was everything. This was the breadbasket of the world, okay? And very consistent and dependable. So they go down to Egypt because the famine was severe. When he was about to enter, he said to Sarai, his wife, I know that you are a woman beautiful in appearance. Guys, it's a nice compliment to tell your wife. When you're traveling to Egypt or anywhere you're going, out of nowhere, hey, I know you're beautiful, honey. She probably liked that. So when the Egyptians see you, they'll say, oh, this is his wife. Then they'll kill me, but they'll let you live. Why? Well, I'm going to take her for ourselves. He's some foreigner. What's he doing here? He's from Ur, way over on the other side of the planet. Okay. Nobody will miss him. She's beautiful in appearance. We'll take her for ourselves. So that's his concern. Remember what God already said. Whoever blesses you, I will bless. Whoever curses you, I will curse. Whether they even know that's what's going on or not. So say you're my sister. It's kind of half true. That it may go well with me because of you, and that my life may be spared for your sake. So Abram's like, at least they'll let me live. They'll still take you, but at least they'll let me live. When Abram entered Egypt, the Egyptians saw the woman was very beautiful. And when the princes of Pharaoh saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh. Wow, she's wonderful. And so, of course, she was taken into Pharaoh's house. He's probably going to marry her off to one of his sons. And for her sake, he dealt well with Abram, because, well, this guy's her brother, so we want to butter her up, so we're going to treat her brother nicely. He had sheep, oxen, male donkeys, male servants, female donkeys, and camels. Abram was already wealthy, and I think Pharaoh was hooking him up even more. But the Lord afflicted Pharaoh and his house with great plagues. These are the before plagues. These are the plagues on Egypt before the plagues on Egypt. Because of Sarai, Abram's wife. Well, this is interesting. So God punishes Pharaoh for something he didn't even know was going on. Why? The stipulations of the covenant. If Pharaoh takes Sarai and marries her off to one of his sons and Abram's out of the picture, what then? He doesn't have a seed. Through his wife will come the seed of the promise. Abram and Sarai need to have a child together. Keep that in the back of your mind for later. They together need to. The true son of the promise would come from a man and his legal official beloved wife. And it had to come from Abram and Sarai. So if Abram says, all right, fine, I guess at least I'm still alive. Go and be with the pharaohs and the princes. That's a problem, okay? So God is going to force everyone's hand to cut this off. And so he afflicts Pharaoh and his house with plagues. So Pharaoh called Abram and said, and you can't blame the guy. Like, what is this you've done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Somehow he found that out, obviously. Why did you say she is my sister so that I took her for my wife? Oh, it's his wife that he's looking for. Now then, here is your wife. Take her and go. And Pharaoh gave men orders concerning him, and they sent him away with his wife and all that he had. So this is interesting. Pharaoh realizes what's up. Buddy, why did you curse? This is your fault, Abram. Why would you do this? Why would you lie to me? We don't know the character of Pharaoh. Is he such a noble guy? He's like, I would have never touched her if I would have known. I don't know. But he knows he's in trouble. He's paying the price for it. And great plagues, how long did this go? We don't know how long he was in Egypt for. This could have been days, weeks, maybe even months. Who knows? And over time, Pharaoh's like, this has got to stop. He realizes somehow it's because of this. So let's get them out of here. And I'm sure Pharaoh was too intimidated to off with their heads and, because I think it's dawned on him. Somehow he's realized Abram's God is protecting him. And I can't mess with that. I'd rather just get them out of here, sent them away with his wife and all he had. And anything that Pharaoh would have gifted him along the way, probably just take it and leave. Take it and leave. So, this story that might seem random and out of place, it makes perfect sense. Right after God says, this land I'm going to give to you, this is going to be your home, he leaves, and he's about ready to threaten the whole God's plan. And God won't let that happen. Okay, so as we know, what will happen, of course, is the child of the promise, Isaac, would be born to them. So he inherits that covenant program, plan. And his son, Jacob, he blesses in such a way. Because you have Jacob and Esau. Why was it that Isaac blessed Jacob? Even though Jacob fooled him, tricked him. It's his plan, but from Jacob's point of view, he could be like, this is legitimate. I'm the younger brother, yes, but my older brother sold it to me. So Esau's in the field, he's a hunter, he's starving, and Jacob makes some lentil stew. This better have been the best tasting lentil stew ever. Because Esau comes in famished, he's hungry, he's like, oh, just keep, who I wouldn't kill for that soup right now, and Jacob said, hey, you know what, I got some soup here, you're hungry, I could solve your problem, name your price, anything, your birthright. Now, if it was any other family, even then, that would have been an insane price, because the eldest son would get the double portion, twice as much as anybody else got. Not only did he get twice as much as any other individual portion, but that was a way of showing you are now the man of the house. You are now the leader of the clan. You inherited it from your father. So Esau was in line for that. Any other family, that'd be insane enough to sell that for a bowl of stew. But you can't tell me that growing up in the years that they've lived, that the conversation didn't come up around the dinner table every now and then of like, oh, by the way, your birthright, Esau, that's a special one. It's not just some ordinary family's birthright. You're the child of the promise between God and what he's going to do through all of humanity. My father Abram, he made it with him. It's passed down to me. Now it's down to you, son. You know, Esau knew the value of his birthright, and he despised it. He sold it off to Jacob. That was basically Esau's way of saying, I don't want any part of this. Yikes. You really didn't want to be the child of the promise that God would work through for the benefit of all mankind? Come on. And he sold it off, and God was very, very, very displeased with Esau. That would have ramifications for him and the Edomites all throughout time. So that was how Jacob got it. And in his mind, it would have been legit, like he sold it to me. But he tricked his dad, and Jacob and Isaac wasn't really cognizant of all that, probably. So he's just like, I think it's Esau, so I'm going to bless him. But that blessing was binding. So anyway, that's the random story about how Jacob got his birthright, right? Okay, what sense does that make? It all works together because God is not going to let his covenant plan be frustrated by anything, including Abram almost giving it away. Okay? We'll see him do that again in another regard in chapter 13. Any thoughts or questions so far? You guys are doing a good job hanging in there. It's our first week back after the break, so you know what? There's a lot of maps going on, a lot of verses, and there's a lot of stuff. But you're hanging in pretty well. Okay. Somebody read verses 1 through 7 of chapter 13. Thanks, Gigi. So Abram leaves Egypt with his family, and Lot was with him the whole time, apparently. And he was very wealthy. He already kind of was going to Egypt, and now more so coming out. And he journeyed on from the Negev as far as Bethel to the place where his tent had been at the beginning. So he's back at the place between, because those dates are beautiful, man. They're delicious, and he wants them. And so he goes to the place between. And so he's back there. It's an important place to him. And he calls upon the name of the Lord again. And Lot, who was with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents. Okay? So that the land could not support both of them dwelling together. Their possessions were so great, their servants started quarreling with Lot. No, this is my master's sheep. No, this is, whatever. And so because they're in this area and they're just kind of staying put, but they get so big, their clans do, and their possessions and their, when you're grazing herds of animals, like they need a lot of land, a lot of space. So they hatch a plan. All right, fine. Let's do this. And Abram said to Lot, "Let there be no strife between you and me, and between your herdsmen and my herdsmen, for we're kinsmen. Is not the whole land before you?" Interesting question. Lot, is not the whole land before you? Like all this land that God is giving to me? Especially the immediate vicinity, but like everywhere. Even though the Canaanites and the Perizzites were living in the land, he's like, it's all before you. Separate yourself from me. If you take the left hand, then I will go to the right. Or if you take the right hand, I'll go to the left. So what's he doing here? He split it up. Remember in Egypt, he kind of threatened the seed portion of the covenant blessing. Now here, what's he doing? He's kind of playing fast and loose with the land promise, isn't he? Lot, you choose what you want, and I'll go the other way. All right, you get first choice. I'll just live with whatever you choose, and I'll just kind of slink off into the background. Well, no, Abram, I'm giving away the secret. Abram, you probably should not have done that. Okay? And really this shows, it really shows the greatness of God and how careful and faithful he is to his covenant. And again, next week is when we'll really see the covenant in detail. I'm just kind of, foreshadowing it a little bit. But God is so determined to follow through on everything he promised, he's not even going to let Abram give it all away. And that should be so very comforting to us. He does the same thing with the Davidic covenant. David, you will always have a son sitting on the throne forever. I'm not even going to let the yahoos that come after you that are sitting on your throne, these wicked kings, I'm not even going to let them ruin it forever. There will be bumps in the road for sure, but I will make sure it happens. You will have a son from your own loins, David, that will sit on the throne forever and ever and ever. oh man, but we get to the end of the Davidic line in 586 BC, and then there's no more David's son sitting on the throne. So God, how could you do that? Man, I thought you promised. Oh, we are on a continuum in the historical timeline. Next week I'll use the Bible. I was tempted to write another timeline on there. I don't know if you're sick of the timelines yet or not, but they're very important. So oftentimes I think we fall into the trap of looking back on world history, biblical history, and kind of almost getting the idea or the notion or the feeling that we are at the end of history, looking back. Like now God has really accomplished all that he wanted, and here we are looking back on it all. Nope. We are on a continuum. Okay, that's chronological snobbery is what I call it. It's looking back and as if everything before me is nothing and my day is everything. And a lot of even Christians, even well-intentioned believers fall into this trap of like, well, today is where God wanted to bring all of history. No. So, okay, I will tell you this. Hear me now, believe me later, and we'll work through a lot of this in the spring too. I'm going to use the word most here. Most of biblical prophecy has yet to be fulfilled. Most. And even most of the Old Testament prophecy has yet to be fulfilled. So how will David have, and this is all part of the unilateral, covenant-keeping God here, how will David have a son from his own loins sit on his throne forever and ever and ever? It's not Solomon. It's not Hezekiah. It's Jesus Christ. And what does it mean that the throne will be forever and ever and ever? His kingdom will never be overtaken. It will never be replaced. It will never be supplanted. As it goes to the end of the millennial kingdom even, I'm playing my hand here, but as it goes to the end of the millennial kingdom, that is forever and ever and ever, it succeeds in history, and that's very important to God, by the way, to triumph over history in the fallen world. At the end of the millennial kingdom, Jesus will have claimed victory over it all and then turns it over to the Father. In that regard, it will forever and ever and ever, David will have a son sit on the throne. Okay, more to be said about that in coming months. But all that to say, God is so very careful to keep every promise he's ever made. And he thinks of the details, and he is very thorough. We are wishy-washy. We go back on our word. We forget what we promised even. And we undercut other people. And we are not people that always come through on our word. God always is. So here's a little example. That was a rabbit trail. But here's a little example now of Abram playing fast and loose with the land blessing. So in verse 10, Lot lifts up his eyes and saw that the Jordan Valley was well watered everywhere, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt in the direction of Zoar. Okay, so flip us around again. We're in a place between. They're up here. Lot, you choose. Why don't you choose? And Lot's looking down. And I know we're elevated bird's eye a little bit. But when you're standing here, Johnny, you can attest to this. You can clearly see Jordan over here, Jordan Valley, Dead Sea, Jordan River, everything. You can make out Jericho from here. And Lot is looking down, and in his time, he's saying, oh, this is well-watered and fertile. Well, it doesn't look that way now, but it was. In antiquity, it was more of a wilderness. It was more lush. And the river flowed down all the way through. It didn't stop like it does today and evaporate. So he looks down in the territories of Zoar and the cities of the plain, and he's like, oh, this looks great. This is wonderful land. I'm going to travel down. He probably skirts Jericho. And I'm going to go down to the cities of the plain towards Zoar. What other cities are around here, I wonder? Other cities of the plain. Ooh. I mean, he leaves Stephenville and he goes to, Dublin and Lingoville. I'm just kidding. Sodom, Gomorrah, all these cities of the plain. So Lot chose for himself that. All the Jordan Valley. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, it mentions. Thus they separated from each other. Abram settled in the land of Canaan, while Lot settled among the cities of the valley and moved his tent as far as, Sodom. This is where Lot settles. And at the time, it's just like a city just like any else, but it's well watered. It's a place people live. I'll go there. This will be great for my flocks. There's something about Sodom that needs to be pointed out. Okay, and verse 13 does it. Now the men of Sodom were wicked, great sinners against the Lord. Sadly, kind of just like any other city, but this even exceedingly so. If you're hanging around Sodom these days, you will find scattered all along the ground unspent sulfur balls that if you were to light on fire, they would light up and disintegrate. It's all around this vicinity. In antiquity, we haven't gotten to this part in Genesis yet. In antiquity, the Dead Sea was higher in elevation, and if I were to point out some of the geographical features, you can even tell. It just recedes in stages. Okay, drive along the road, there's a marker somewhere up here about this high that somebody canoed from the Jordanian side over here and marked where the water level was in the 1880s, I think it was. And so it's just retreating. And in antiquity, the sea was higher in elevation. And Sodom probably was a coastal town. Okay, so the sea's kind of up to here. And so when God rains fiery hailstones, the Bible calls them, these balls of sulfur, as he rains them down on Sodom, sorry, I misspoke. The unspent ones are here, and I'll tell you why in a second. You will find spent sulfur balls all around here. You'll find skeletons that are like twisted by heat and all that. It's crazy. Down here, in this area, you'll find unspent sulfur balls that you could pick up and light on fire. I've seen videos of somebody that's done it. And why are they unspent down here but spent up here? They landed in the water at the time. The water extinguished it. And it's pelted down in here. And so you go down in the floor of the valley, and you'll pick up sulfur balls that have not completely burned, whereas the ones up here have. It's very interesting. Very, very interesting. I can point you to a video if you want of a really good, reputable archaeologist that puts that to the test. He goes to Sodom, he starts lighting them on fire. It's hilarious. But Lot settles there in Sodom. Now the men, of course, were wicked. The Lord said to Abram after Lot had separated from him. Okay, and this, I love this. This is why, now the reason why I love the place between is because it's a special place for Jonna and I. That's my favorite thing about the place between. My next favorite thing about the place between. So Abram's back here. Lot goes, he separates, he moves to Sodom. And Abram's back here at the place between. Lift up your eyes and look from the place where you are. So he's here. Okay. We're going to go bird's eye a little bit. Abram wasn't this tall. But you can see a lot from where he is. Lift up your eyes, look from the place where you are. Northward. Look at all this northward. This is where you came from, Abram. And southward. Ooh, hope we don't get too dizzy. Southward, towards Jerusalem and beyond, towards the Negev. And you've already passed through there, Abram, in your travels. In his travels, God has brought him to see a lot of the land. Eastward, towards the Mediterranean Sea. Look at that. Oh, there's some big skyscrapers over there. I'm looking west, aren't I? Yikes. I'm going to cheat and go westward first. And then eastward. All right, here's the eastward. The Jordan Rift. Country of Jordan is over there. Jordan River goes down into the Dead Sea. Northward and southward and eastward and westward. Look every direction, Abram. For all the land that you see, I will give to you and to your offspring for a few years. I will give to you and to your offspring until you mess it up, and I bring you off to Babylon, and then it's done. To you and to your offspring until I send my very own son, and then you reject him, and then I'm going to kick you out, and then you'll... To you and to your offspring forever. I will make your offspring as the dust of the earth, so that if one can count the dust of the earth, can one count the dust of the earth? No. Your offspring can also be counted. And later in chapter 15, he's like, look up at the stars, so shall your sons be. The point isn't there's as many of his descendants as there are stars. It's just they're uncountable. That's the point. Arise, walk through the length and breadth of the land, for I will give it to you. So we don't know how much time passes, but no doubt Abram journeys on, and he is going to wander around. There's more to see. He's already passed through from the way north to the way south and back. He's watched Lot go on down to Sodom, and he's up here in the place between eating dates. And so now he's going to journey all around. And from biblical history basically takes place here, and other places too, but here. So Abram moved his tent and came and settled by the oaks of Mamre, which are at Hebron, and there he built an altar to the Lord. From this point on, Abram's home base kind of then comes to be in Hebron. So just south of where he was the place between, passes by what would be Jerusalem, comes down to Hebron. And so, I have Mamre here. Mamre has been discovered. And what's really interesting, there is layer upon layer upon layer of archaeological layers here. From the bedrock area that Abram lived in, and there, again, you can't see totally the clarity of the satellite image here, but there are holes in the bedrock from the ground that trees once were. You don't just get random holes in the bedrock anywhere. Trees, big oaks used to be way back in antiquity. Now it's just the hole in the bedrock is left, and they are kind of scattered throughout. But this was the area basically that Abram settled. Later then you have a city, then you have Roman layer, and Byzantine church layer, and then Islamic mosque layer, and then you have Crusader fortress layer, all this sort of stuff. But here is where Abram lived. Outside of Hebron, the oaks of Mamre is where he was. And there he built an altar to the Lord. Okay. A land, a seed, and a blessing, Abram. And again, I've said it a few times already, we'll see this more in detail next week. That's kind of like where the rubber meets the road really in this Abrahamic covenant. Is Abram, I'm going to do this. He could have said whether you like it or not. Abram liked it. He liked it. And I'm not saying Abram is thinking, I'm going to give it all away. No, it's just by his actions, it could have all crumbled apart if God wasn't basically just kind of keeping him back on track. Because God is so insistent to follow through with what he's going to do. When he enters a unilateral covenant, he's going to make sure it happens, even if the other party messes up along the way. Okay? I think that speaks of a very important aspect of God's character, of how bound and determined he is to do all this, not only for Abraham, yes, he benefited from it, through Abraham, for what purpose? To bless all the families of the earth. That's why this is such a huge turning point in all of human history. I would even argue, get your Rotten Tomatoes out, this is the turning point in all of human history. Until Jesus returns. Okay? Is because God is focusing his plan now through Abraham. Remember Genesis 3:15. Your seed will crush the head of the serpent, all that. So Eve, somehow through you, this will all be solved. Now he narrows down to Abraham. And there's going to be more narrowing down that God does through biblical history. Later he narrows down, through Isaac, then through Jacob. And then he enters the covenant with the nation of Israel, and he'll narrow down even through David, and then to Jesus, of course. It's the apex of all of it, of course, is Jesus Christ. But he starts that focused plan through Abram here. Regardless of what Abram does, God is going to carry it through. I think that can, without at the risk of spiritualizing, I think it is fair to draw on that for how even we should operate. I'm going to do what is right, what is godly. I'm going to do what I've determined to promise to do, regardless of external factors. Regardless of how anybody else is operating around me, I'm still going to do what is right to do. That's hard in our daily lives. We all know it. That's hard, especially when there's external pressures. But that is definitely a characteristic of God, I think, that we need to model in our own lives. Any thoughts or questions? It's chapters 12 and 13. It seems like that on the surface, doesn't it? And maybe in Abram's mind, it was selfless, maybe. Oh, Lot, you get first choice, I'll just live with whatever. That looks really humble and all that. And I have no problem with imagining Abram still having the best of kind intentions, but that still kind of messes with God's promise to Abraham and what he's going to do. And maybe Abram's not thinking, oh, this will ruin it all. Maybe he's not thinking along those lines. But I think it's just one example that seems to be kind of a theme that's running through these chapters of like, Abram, in spite of how you act, even if it's with good intentions or not, in spite of what you do, I'm going to make this happen. Yeah, it would be interesting to know what was going through his mind. There are examples in Scripture of things that seem like good intention on the surface. Kenny, you and I we've been reading through Isaiah. Remember Isaiah 7 and Ahaz. Isaiah tells him, ask for a sign, anything you want. Okay, don't worry about Pekah and Rezin. Don't worry, your southern kingdom is going to, don't worry about that, okay? God's got it under control. To prove it to you, ask for yourself any sign you want, Ahaz. And Ahaz, I would not dare ask for a sign. Like, far be it from me to demand of you a sign. That seems noble. God was upset with that because he knows what's going on in Ahaz's heart. I don't want a sign for this. I don't want to play along with what God's doing. And so he was being shifty there. And so God sees the heart. So there are several things that on the surface might seem noble and selfless and kind that if you really knew what's going on in the person's heart, which we can't, God does, that would really reveal what's going on. Again, I don't think Abraham had any ill intention or sneakiness. It's just, in spite of how he lives his life, God is still going to do what God does. And this is not at all to paint Abraham as some bumbling fool. He's not. He is the man par excellence. He's the man of faith par excellence. I mean, he is a great, fantastic man of God. But he's fallen like you and I. And God chose to work through him for his greater purposes. Nothing about Abraham, although Abraham does show himself to be a man of faith, that's not why God chooses him. God chose him because God chose him. And this is reiterated a few times throughout the Scriptures. It ain't because of Abraham. And there's even a time where God is so upset with the nation of Israel, he's like, you're just like your forefather, the Chaldean. You bunch of Chaldeans, and so he's just kind of like digging on him a little bit for like, you came from over here. You're here because I chose Abram. You're not here because you're great. In fact, you're the least. You're a bunch of Chaldeans, man. I mean, you're here because I called Abram way over here, and that I'm the one at work, God is basically telling them. Not because of any inherent greatness of yourselves, because of God's greatness to work through whom he wanted to call to the other side of the world, basically, for the benefit of all the families of the earth. Cool? All right. Father, we love you so much, and we thank you that you are God and that we are not. All that you do is good and right and just and fair. And we thank you, Lord, that you are the judge and we are not. We thank you that you are always at work, and that you are weaving things together that are beyond our understanding and comprehension. But may we always just give you glory for all of it, be humble, but be used by you in great ways also to further that blessing to all families of the world by sharing the good news of Jesus Christ with them. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.